Audible is the leading provider of spoken word entertainment and audiobooks, ranging from bestsellers to celebrity memoirs, news, business, and self-development. Every month, members get 1 credit to pick any title, plus 2 Audible originals from a monthly selection, and access to daily news digests from the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post, as well as guided meditation programs. Between a full-time job in IT and a full-time job in podcasting, it gets harder and harder to sit down and read the books I'm interested in. This is where Audible comes in. I can listen on my daily commute, relaxing, or while out running errands and still get in the books I've been wanting to get into. You can download titles and listen offline anytime, anywhere. The app is free and can be installed on all smartphones and tablets. Now you can try Audible risk-free with a special 30-day free trial by visiting audibletrial.com/Nerdery and Murdery. That's audibletrial.com/Nerdery and Murdery. Don't let your busy life get in the way of that great book you've been wanting to read. Go get your free trial of Audible today. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. This is Geoffrey, and we've talked about many times before that I experience problems and struggles with my mental health. And really, without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is therapy does work. It's helped for me, but what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help. Or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships at work, or you're not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, it's really time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles, and it's time to start feeling better because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in-person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is a customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. So join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself because you are your greatest asset. And there's a special offer to Nerdery and Murdery listeners. You can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/Nerdery and Murdery. That's betterhelp.com/Nerdery and Murdery. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast.
Why the hell was Natalie Portman dressed like Wilma Deering? Was she looking for Tweaky?
Welcome to episode 66 of Nerdery and Murdery.
Big 66. I'm Zig with your Nerdery.
And I'm Geoffrey with your Murdery. Sounds like we're doing another Star Wars episode today.
Yes. We're doing Attack of the Clones.
Great.
Attack of the Clones. After a mixed critical response to Phantom Menace, Lucas was hesitant to return to the writing desk. In March of 2000, just 3 months before the start of principal photography, Lucas finally completed his rough draft for episode 2. So yeah, 3 months after filming, or before filming, right into pre-production, he's still working on the first draft of the script. Lucas continued to iterate on his rough draft, producing a proper first and second draft. For help with the third draft, which would later become the shooting script, Lucas brought on Jonathan Hales, who had written several episodes of the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles. That's a well-written piece if you've never seen it.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah, it is really, really good. But he had limited experience writing theatrical films. The final script was completed just 1 week before the start of principal photography.
It's crazy.
Yeah, that's insane. As an in-joke, the film's working title was Jar Jar's Great Adventure. In writing The Empire Strikes Back, Lucas initially decided that Lando Calrissian was a clone and came from the planet of clones, which caused the Clone Wars, mentioned by Obi-Wan Kenobi in A New Hope. He later came up with an alternate concept for an army of clone shock troopers from a remote planet, which were used by the Republic as an army in the war that followed. Lucas has noted that Palpatine's rise to power is very similar to that of Adolf Hitler in Nazi Germany. As Chancellor of Germany, the later was granted emergency powers, as is Palpatine. Comparisons have been made to Octavian, who became Augustus, the first emperor of Rome, and Napoleon Bonaparte. So, I have to say, I'm glad he brought Hale on, because I think Attack of the Clones is a much better written piece.
Oh, it's definitely a better. It's definitely a better piece than the Phantom Menace was.
Yes,
it's a better movie. Mm-hmm. It has its faults, but the action in it is really, really good. The lightsaber scenes. Excuse me, the lightsaber scenes are really, really good, especially because we finally get to see Yoda with a lightsaber.
Yeah, go
and
to
that's
town.
Amazing.
Yeah, he's like a little green Cuisinart.
Yes, that's absolutely amazing. The bad with it is the love story.
Yeah.
The love story leaves a lot to be desired, and it's not believable.
No, it's almost like they were filming and somebody went, "Oh crap, we got to get the love story up and running."
Yeah, I agree. The love story is almost like an afterthought in there. It's not well acted, and you really don't believe the relationship that's building between Padme and Anakin.
No.
It's not believable.
No. Because she hasn't seen him in 10 years.
Right. It's very forced, and it's just lack of a better term, it's crappy.
Yeah.
It's a crappy love story.
Yeah, and a lot of people give Hayden Christensen a lot of flack too, and I don't think that's necessarily deserved. I think he did the best with what he had. Could another actor may have done a little better? I don't know. But I don't think so. I think especially someone that young,
Right.
when you're dealt that bag of parts and no instruction manual, I think he put it together as best as he possibly could, and probably better than I would have. So I was actually pretty impressed. If you go back and watch some of the scenes with Christensen in it, I was pretty impressed with how he was able to thread the needle as well as he did. Because he didn't have a lot to work with. Again, with Hale, he made the story a little better. The dialogue wasn't nearly as clunky.
No, not at all. Not as Phantom Menace.
No.
Right. No. Absolutely not. The dialogue was better. Plus, I really love the fact that you get to see the clone army.
Yeah.
You get to see the beginnings of the Clone War.
And you realize why Boba Fett always wears his helmet.
Yes.
Because he's also one of them.
Right. So we get to see the beginnings of Boba Fett. And one of my favorite scenes in the movie, and the funny thing is, anytime I get a new soundbar, sound system, anything, what I use to test is the asteroid battle scene.
When he's setting off those seismic bombs?
Yes. I use that every time to test sound.
Yeah, because that's an amazing sound. That was what I was so happy about with the Book of Boba Fett, is he actually used one in Slave One.
And you get, and that's the first time you get to see Slave One, which it's not called Slave One anymore. That's been removed, but you get to see Boba Fett's ship in its glory.
Yeah.
And see just how badass that ship is.
Yeah. They don't call it a fire spray for nothing.
Right.
So they set the story 10 years after the Phantom Menace. As thousands of planetary systems slowly secede from the Galactic Republic and join the newly formed Confederacy of Independent Systems. However, this is not the rebellion.
Correct.
It's different.
Right.
Which, I don't know, I kind of feel like maybe they should have touched on the beginnings of the rebellion, because I don't think we ever really got that. I think Rogue One is as close as we ever came to how the rebellion, but it was already going by then.
Right.
I think there were some books published, but they're no longer canon, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct. They're not. They're now called the Legends.
So the galaxy was on the brink of civil war, and Obi-Wan Kenobi investigates a mysterious assassination attempt of Amidala, which leads him to uncover the clone army in service of the Republic and the truth behind the separatist movements. And so in the story, the clones were set up by Master Sifo-Dyas.
Mm-hmm.
We never find out who that person is.
We never find out who he is. We never see anything more about it.
Yeah.
I think that's a piece that's lacking in the story.
Yeah, it's
as
almost
well.
like a loose end they forgot to tie.
Yes.
It's like, oh, hey, what's that string? Oh, that's Sifo-Dyas.
Right.
They did do some filming in Australia and Sydney Sydney in Australia, sorry. And they filmed a little bit in Tunisia again and in Spain for some of the callbacks to Tatooine. The film was released in the United States on May 16th, 2002. And it received mixed reviews, with some critics hailing it as an improvement over its predecessor. And a lot of people consider The Phantom Menace as the worst installment of the franchise.
Right. We talked about that too.
Yes.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, it's not good. I still like the newer 3 a little better, but it also feels like they started to go one direction and then they switched directions and then they went in another direction again.
Oh, and those 3 are a whole different subject. It's no.
It became the first Star Wars film to be outgrossed in its year release, placing 3rd domestically after Spider-Man, The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. But it did place higher than Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. 10 years after the Battle of Naboo, the Galactic Republic is threatened by a separatist movement organized by former Jedi Master Count Dooku. Senator Padme Amidala comes to Coruscant to vote on a motion to create an army to assist the Jedi against the threat, narrowly avoiding an assassination attempt upon her arrival. She is placed under the protection of Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi and his apprentice Anakin Skywalker. The pair thwart a second attempt on Padme's life and subdue the assassin Zam Wesell. There was so much that was supposed to be done with that one assassin, right? I mean, that was the big ramp up. Like the Zam Wesell was going to be a big deal, and again, it's another loose thread they just left.
Well, they did that in The Phantom Menace too with, oh my gosh, and now I forgot her name. The assassin.
Oh, the one that collects the lightsabers?
No, the assassin on Tatooine during the pod race.
Yeah, with the long gun.
Yes, and
Taking pot shots.
I've lost the name
Yeah.
now.
No, I'm with you.
But that's another one where you see this character and you think there's going to be something more to it, and then it just goes away. And with Zam Wesell, I think it was, I don't know, that it was lacking. Now, you do get to see yet again Anakin as a pilot.
Yes.
And you get to see how good of a pilot he is.
Yes.
Good with his instincts, good with his skills. And so that's the good part about the whole chase to get Zam Wesell is once again seeing the pilot skills of Anakin that we will see one more time in Revenge of the Sith.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I'm thinking about where he's in the Jedi fighter fighting off the little, what are they called? The droids.
The buzz droids.
The buzz droids that are tearing up his ship. He's still flying like the Red Baron.
Yes.
So Obi-Wan goes to this mysterious ocean planet called Camino, where he discovers an army of clones being produced for the Republic, again under Sifo-Dyas, a deceased Jedi Master. And this is where he first meets the bounty hunter Jango Fett, who the Caminans used as the template for the clone army. And one of his payment was that he wanted a son of his own so he could raise him naturally. Right. Which is who Boba is. They end up going to Tatooine, or Anakin and Padme end up going to Tatooine to visit his mother Shmi, and they find out she's been taken over by Tusken Raiders. So Anakin rides out and destroys the entire Tusken Raider village, kills them all. Women, children, pets.
Which is really your first there's a couple of instances before this, but this is really your first steps towards him going towards the dark side.
Yeah.
You see a little bit of it earlier in the film when he is angry about his being held back in his progression in the Jedi Order.
Yeah.
But really here, his slaughter of the Tusken Raider village is when you really get to see how he's stepping into the dark side, and he's stepping towards the dark side.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know how to put this. I wish it would have been written by somebody else. Again, with George Lucas, he's a brilliant cinematographer. I don't, fault him for that. He's brilliant at sound design. He's technologically intense. He has a very gifted mind for creating worlds and ideas, but he's an idea guy.
Right.
He's not a writer.
No.
He really isn't.
Not a dialogue writer.
No. I mean, he's great for original story concepts. Mm-hmm. That's his forte.
Right.
He's great at cinematography. Again, that's his forte. But I think it may have to do with the fact that we were waiting so long for this, because a lot, our younger viewers might not realize this, but there was a desert for a long time for us. There was a desert in Star Trek and Star Wars and Doctor Who for a long time that we didn't have any of this. I'm thinking in the late 80s. We got other stuff instead, but none of it had any lasting power.
Right. Not like Star Wars did.
No.
Not like Star Trek did.
No. Or Doctor Who.
Right.
It's just we were clamoring for anything. And then we got these movies and it was like, oh, these are great. But again, I've gone back and watched A New Hope. It really isn't a good movie. It really isn't.
Oh, I'm going to disagree with you on that one.
It really isn't. It's a beautiful movie. It's shot perfectly. The acting is really good. But it's not. It's not compared to The Empire Strikes Back. A New Hope is not a good movie. And neither is this.
Well, it's hard if you compare anything to The Empire Strikes Back and the Star
which
Wars
was
genre.
a good movie.
Yes.
Everything about that movie was aces, straights, and flushes. And
still think A New Hope was a good movie. I really do. I mean, it was the first. It was the start.
Yeah, and it captivated a lot of people. And it was again. I'm not going to besmirch George Lucas by saying again that he's not great at concepts. He's not great at all of these things. But sometimes his storylines need to be punched up. Actually, all the time. And any time that we did get his storyline punched up, it was better. Mm-hmm. When you got a really, really good writer involved, it was exceptional.
Sure.
Again, I'm thinking of Rogue One. That was a wonderful film. I can watch that over and over and over and over again, and it's still beautiful. It's still wonderful. It's still great.
Right.
But I don't know. And then maybe it's because I'm more of a Star Trek, Doctor Who guy than I am a Star Wars. Not that I'm not into Star Wars. Not that I didn't have 1,000 action figures, but I don't know. So Dooku uses circling back. So Dooku uses the Force in an attempt to kill Anakin and Obi-Wan in order to distract Yoda and escape to Coruscant, where he delivers the plans of a super weapon to Sidious. The super weapon is the Death Star that we see in A New Hope.
Right.
And this is when the clones take off and are released from Kamino. Yeah.
Well, they bring him to Coruscant.
Yeah.
And they release him from there.
Yeah, that's right. I'm sorry.
Yeah, because that's right at the very end of the movie when you get to see that whole clone army as they're loading up on the ships to head out to help the Jedi.
Yes. Senator Representative Jar Jar Binks, where he does get a cameo, proposes a successful vote to grant emergency powers to Chancellor Palpatine, allowing the clone army to be authorized. You also get to see Samuel L. Jackson as Mace Windu when they go to rescue. That was incredible.
Yeah, that's part of the incredible lightsaber battles.
Yeah.
That the battle on Geonosis is absolutely incredible. So much happens during it. And that's where we get to see Yoda.
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, we get to see Obi-Wan and Anakin battle Dooku, which is great in itself. And where Anakin loses his hand. But then Yoda gets to come into play. And that part I can watch over and over and over again because the lightsaber battles from Geonosis all the way through towards the end is just amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's one great cinematic event. It again, beautifully shot. I love all the stuff on Geonosis. I love the idea of not so much a desert planet, but an arid planet. I think that's a great idea. About basically insect creatures building hives out of dirt, essentially, but still being an advanced civilization. That's just, that idea is so far out there. I think it's brilliant. And I've seen it used a few times since.
Well, and I don't know this for sure, but I think that some of the idea of the Geonosians came from Geonosians.
We're not grammatists.
Right. Came from the legends, the Killiks, because the Killiks were these hive creatures as well.
Oh, yeah. Okay. On its opening day, Attack of the Clones made $30.1 million.
Wow.
Combined with $6 million from midnight screenings. So, yeah, $36.1 million from midnight till the next day. One day. I think the film eventually grossed $310 million, $310,676,740 in North America. Yeah. So, I mean, I understand why Disney bought the Star Wars property for what they bought it for, because they've made that money back. What did it, like, $3 million or $3 billion?
$4 billion.
$4 billion.
$4 billion is what Disney bought Star Wars for, and they made it back in the first year.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's definitely a cash cow, and we were lining up to see it.
Sure.
I think I saw it on opening night with you guys, and then I went and saw it on opening day with my grandfather, because my grandfather took me to see the first one.
I've seen every single Star Wars movie on their opening day except for Solo.
Really?
It's the only one I did not see on opening day.
Here in the last few years, I haven't been wanting to go see him on the opening day. I've been wanting to wait a week or so and then go to my favorite little theater with the kids where we can kind of sit in a small little theater.
I can't wait. I can't wait.
I did see Rogue One on OmniMax at the Omni Theater. That was breathtaking.
I'm sure.
Yeah, that was amazing. So talking a little bit more about Attack of the Clones. Again, you get Timur Morrison. You can't be unhappy with this.
Well, you also get John Williams again for the music.
John Williams for music.
The music is brilliant.
Yeah, I think that it's some of the best music they made. I think it's better than some of the originals. Mm-hmm. You get to see the clones. You get Yoda. You get Christopher Lee, the great Christopher Lee. So yeah, I would definitely say it's better than The Phantom Menace,
without a doubt.
Is it a good movie? I don't know, because again, I'm circling back on I don't know if The New Hope is a good movie or not. I know I like it.
I think Attack of the Clones is a good movie. Like I said, its fatal flaws is the romance.
Yeah.
Because the romance is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's not believable.
Yeah, and a couple of loose strings here or there.
Right.
Yeah, but it's definitely worth a watch, especially if you're interested in the Star Wars story. Mm-hmm. So yeah, definitely get out and see it because you want to complete the set. You want to see Revenge of the Sith. But to see Revenge of the Sith, you kind of need to see this one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You can't skip around with that one.
No, it doesn't make any sense.
No.
So that's about it for Attack of the Clones. Other than, get out there, take a look, see what you think. Hit us back with your ideas. Because I'm in a quandary about this one because I know I like it, but I don't know if it's something that I could go back and watch time and time again.
Well, the thing is, for me, I've gone back and watched all of them time and time again.
Yeah.
Except for the last 3 that just came out. I have not watched those time and time again because I have a lot of problems with those.
Okay. Do you have more problems with the next 3 than you do with these 3?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, not than Phantom Menace. Phantom Menace, even though I've watched that many times, it's my least favorite of all the 9, of the Skywalker saga. Attack of the Clones is up there in the middle of the pack for me.
Right on.
I think it's a good movie. I think it has its problems, but it's one that I can enjoy over and over and over.
Yeah, it is. It's a fun ride. I will say that it's a fun ride. That's basically what you're looking for. Well, that's about it for Attack of the Clones. Thank you, sir, for discussing that with me. I instead of just reading off a bunch of facts, I actually wanted to talk about ideas on this one. So thank you for doing that.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Thank you for that trip.
Sure.
With that, we will step over to the murdery side of the house.
Murder.
For my sources today, I got my information off Britannica, Rolling Stones, Criminal Minds Wiki, Wikipedia, and I thought it was time, because it's been a while, that we haven't done a cult.
A cult.
So we're doing a cult today, and this is a pretty famous one.
What's the cult?
James Jones and the People's Temple.
Jim Jones!
Yes.
Guy on a Punch. You know what? I had to put that song in here.
So the Reverend James Warren Jim Jones was the founder and leader of the People's Temple. It was a cult and famous for the mass murder suicide of its over 900 members in the Guyana jungle compound informally known as Jonestown on November 18th, 1978. This is the largest loss of American civil lives in a single event until 9/11.
Yes. Including the senator and other people that they shot.
Yes. Oh, yes. I have that in here.
That happened at the same time.
Yes. So Jones was born in rural Indiana at the height of the Great Depression in 1931. He was the only child of James Thurman Jones, who was an unemployed World War I veteran, and Lynetta Putman, who was a religious woman who believed that her son was some kind of messiah. James suffered from severe breathing difficulties due to injuries which he sustained in a chemical weapons attack, and the family was extremely poor and lived in a shack without plumbing. The family attempted to earn an income through farming, but again met with failure when Jones's father's health further deteriorated. The family often lacked adequate food and relied on financial support from their extended family. They would sometimes resort to foraging in nearby forest and fields to supplement their diet. People who grew up with Jim Jones, they would later recall he was a very odd, solitary kid who was obsessed with death and religion. His dark qualities, his need to control people, his deceit, and his anger towards people who betray or abandon him could be traced back to his childhood in Indiana. He was a loner during his youth, and Jim would entertain his playmates in the loft of his family barn and made them his captive audience. One time he even locked up his friends in the barn.
Wow.
As a child, Jones developed an affinity for Pentecostalism and a desire to preach. He was ordained as a Christian minister in the Independent Assemblies of God, attracting his first group of followers while participating in the Pentecostal Latter Rain movement and the Healing Revival during the 1950s. He often officiated funerals for small animals in his family's property, and he killed a cat with a knife once. He was also a voracious reader who studied the lives of Karl Marx, Joseph Stalin, Mao Zedong, Mahatma Gandhi, and Adolf Hitler from a very young age.
I have heard that somewhere he was quoted as saying that one of his ideas was that he could bring about international communism to America by religious means.
Yes.
That he didn't actually believe in the religious stuff, but it was a means to an end.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I was thinking about doing this one. So
No, that's absolutely fine. One biographer did suggest that he developed his unusual interest because he found it difficult to make a lot of friends. Mm-hmm. Although his strange religious practices stood out for most of his neighbors, they reported that he misbehaved in more serious ways. He frequently stole candy from merchants in the town, and his mother was required to pay for his thefts. He regularly used offensive profanity, commonly greeting friends and neighbors by saying, "Good morning, you son of a bitch," or "Hello, you dirty bastard."
So he's from Texas.
That's what it sounds like, right?
Yeah.
Commenting on his childhood, Jones stated, quote, "I was ready to kill by the end of the third grade. I mean, I was so aggressive and hostile, I was ready to kill. Nobody gave me love, any understanding. In those days, a parent was supposed to go with the child to school functions. There was some kind of school performance and everybody's parent was there but mine. I'm standing there alone, always was alone." Since his mother worked outside to support the family and his father was drunk and unresponsive most of the time, Jones would often wander the town alone, making friends with those he considered outcasts like him. Developments of the cult, finding the outcasts. In one such occasion, he invited the town's only black man to his home, and his father threw them out. In response, Jones stopped talking to his father for many, many years. Shortly after, his parents divorced, and Jones moved out of town with his mother. In high school, Jones would continue to stand out from his peers. He almost always carried his Bible with him. His religious views often alienated other young people. He frequently confronted them for drinking beer, smoking, and dancing. And while he was attending a baseball game in Richmond, Indiana, Jones was bothered by the treatment of African Americans who attended the game. The events at that baseball game brought discrimination against African Americans to Jones' attention and influenced his strong aversion to racism.
Yes, he was very anti-racist.
Yes. In 1949, 1 year after completing high school, he married nurse Marcine Baldwin, who was 4 years his senior. Their first home was in Bloomington, where Marceline worked in a nearby hospital while Jones attended college. Marceline was a Methodist, and she and Jones immediately fell into arguments about church. Jones's strong opposition to the Methodist Church's racial segregationist practices was an early strain on their marriage. Jones insisted on attending Bloomington's Full Gospel Tabernacle, but eventually compromised and began attending a local Methodist church on most Sunday mornings. Despite attending churches every week, Jones privately pressed his wife to accept atheism. He also attended a speech by former First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt about the plight of African Americans, which deeply impressed him. It was from this he began to espouse support for communism and other radical political views of the time. In 1951, Jones began attending a number of meetings and rallies held by the Communist Party, USA, CPUSA, while he was studying at Indianapolis Butler University. As a result, Jones and his mother, who accompanied him to one of these events, were publicly harassed by the FBI. While anti-communist feelings rapidly rising in the U.S. at the beginning of the Cold War, Jones decided that he would infiltrate the church and use it to both propagate a message of racial and social justice without suspicion, and also reach out to people who could be open to such messages but opposed to communism on religious grounds.
Nice.
Jones himself fluctuated between agnosticism and atheism for most of his life. In 1952, Jones became a student pastor at the Somerset Southside Methodist Church, but left when its leaders barred him from integrating blacks into its congregation. He witnessed a faith-healing service at the Seventh-day Baptist Church and realized that he could attract more people and money through such services. Finally, in 1956, Jones organized a massive religious convention in Indianapolis, in which he shared the pulpit with then-minister William M. Branham and used the benefits to launch his own church, which settled on the People's Temple Christian Church Full Gospel after using several names. There was an explicitly interracial mission that adopted many common traits of black churches, like gospel music, and was particularly influenced by the preaching style of Father Divine, who was an African-American reverend who advocated a communal living and claimed at different times to be God, Jesus, or a part of them.
I have heard that some iteration of the People's Temple is still around. the ideas of racial desegregation and some of the other ideas of maybe not necessarily communism, but helping the poor and stuff. Those are not bad ideas, and that these people are still up and running.
Wouldn't surprise me. I don't know.
Because there's some good ideas here. He's not wrong about everything.
I don't know about the church as a whole, but it wouldn't surprise me if there's still some out there.
Yeah.
In 1956, Jones made his first visit to investigate Father Divine's peace mission in Philadelphia. Jones was careful to explain that his visit to the peace mission was so he could give an authentic, unbiased, and objective statement about its activities to his fellow Pentecostal ministers. That same year, Jones broke ties with the CPUSA after it followed the Soviet Union's decision to condemn Stalinism. In 1960, Jones was appointed director of the Human Rights Commission by Democratic Indianapolis Mayor Charles Boswell. Jones ignored Boswell's orders to keep a low profile and used his new position to gain more followers and successfully campaigned for the integration of several Indianapolis locations, services, and companies. He also rallied against so-called white flight and in favor of multiracial communities and adopted children from different races. In 1961, the Joneses became the first white couple in Indiana to adopt a black child who was named Jim Jones Jr. His involvement in the fight for civil rights in Indiana came to an abrupt end in 1962, however, when Jones moved to southern Brazil after reading in a magazine that the area would be safe during a nuclear war that he thought was impending.
In 62? Mm-hmm. I'm not surprised. A lot of people thought that.
Oh, yeah. A lot of people thought that the nuclear war was coming. Due to the government instability in Brazil at the time, Jones carefully utilized a Christian discourse without his usual socialist undertones so he wouldn't be seen as a communist. This lasted until 1963 when Jones was alerted that the Indianapolis temple was about to collapse in his absence. Jones returned and prophesied that the world would be engulfed in a nuclear war on July 15, 1967. As a result, the temple made an exodus to California's Redwood Valley near Ukiah, where it set a communal farm from which it would create a socialist Garden of Eden on Earth after the disaster. The location was pre-selected after Jones had read in the same magazine that Northern California would be part of the U.S., less likely to be damaged in a nuclear exchange. I don't understand that.
Well, okay, so they're going to hit L.A. This is a big city. They're probably going to hit Frisco, Seattle. How?
Yeah, I don't understand that one either. Well, of course, the war didn't come. The temple's following grew exponentially in those years, and it opened chapters in all major cities across California. Jones took advantage of the new location's greater liberal tradition to gradually move from Christian rhetoric to what he recalled, quote, apostolic socialism, and making his claims to his own divinity. The group established its headquarters in San Francisco, where he became heavily involved in political and charitable activities throughout the 1970s. Jones developed connections with prominent California politicians and was appointed as chairman of the San Francisco Housing Authority Commission in 1975. Jones became progressively more controlling in his followers in the People Temple, which had its peak of over 3,000 members at the time.
Wow.
Soon after, he would adopt the name The Prophet. Jones's followers engaged in a communal lifestyle in which many turned over all their income and property to Jones and the People's Temple, who directed all aspects of community life. Eventually, he openly condemned Christianity and belief in a sky god in general, stating that his goal was the promotion of Marxism in the U.S. and that Mao Zedong was his inspiration. He wrote a booklet called...
Wow, Mao Zedong murdered a lot of people.
Oh, yeah. He wrote a booklet called The Letter Killeth, in which he derided the King James Bible as a tool made to oppress women and minorities, yet claimed himself to be the reincarnation of Jesus, as well as Buddha, Vladimir Lenin, Gandhi, and Father Divine, even though the last two were alive when he was born. Jones also established ties with leftist groups like CPUSA, the Black Panthers, the American Indian Movement, and the Symbionese Liberation Army, and also with media outlets, most notably the San Francisco Chronicle.
Did you say the Symbionese Liberation Movement? That's the Patty Hearst people.
Uh-huh. In 1975, Temple voters were instrumental to elect Democrat George Moscone as mayor of San Francisco. Several other figures of the Democratic Party met Jones or spoke favorably of him in the 1970s. In conflict with his furious defense of celibacy outside of marriage, Jones was arrested for soliciting gay sex in a Los Angeles theater restroom in 1973. Soon there was a growing number of Temple defectors who were accusing him of pressuring male and female members alike to have sex with him and of publicly shaming, undressing, beating, and sexually abusing members in punishment for various misdeeds. He was likewise accused of taking large quantities of drugs and using false prescriptions issued by Temple doctors and of totalitarian practices like forbidding members to talk to each other, encouraging denouncement of dissidents, separating children from their parents to be raised communally, planting false defectors to catch members who actually wanted to defect, and propagating fears among the congregation that they would be killed by outsiders as soon as they left the protection of the temple. Very, very cult-like ideals.
That's very culty. That's what they do.
Yes, especially telling people that outside of the cult is where they would be in danger. They were safe as long as they stayed inside the cult, no matter what was happening to them inside.
Damn it! And it saddens me because, again, not every one of this guy's ideas were horrific. Some of them were kind of beautiful. Maybe that's how they lure people in.
Sure. Well, by telling. You see within cults, by telling them things will be better here, you will be accepted here, you will not be shunned here, and then once they're inside, they get controlled.
Yeah.
He would increasingly use fear to control and manipulate his followers. Jones frequently warned his followers there was an enemy seeking to destroy them. The identity of that enemy changed over time from the Ku Klux Klan to Nazis to redneck vigilantes, and finally the American government. He frequently prophesied that fires, car accidents, and death or injury would come upon anyone unfaithful to him and his teachings. He constantly pressed his followers to be aggressive in promoting and fulfilling his beliefs. Impressed by high-profile defections like Suzanne Jones, one of his adopted children, and Grace Stone, the temple's attorney and church board chairman in Ukiah, Jones organized white nights in which he ordered members of his staff to drink poison as a test of his loyalty, revealing that the drink wasn't actually poisoned. He actually did this several times, where he would gather them in mass and tell them they had to drink poison, and only after they all drank would he say, "No, that wasn't really poison.
It wasn't really poison.
This was a test. This was a test."
So maybe that's how
loyalty.
he was able to get away with the I think it actually wasn't Kool-Aid; it was Rite Aid.
Right. May have been.
Flavor Aid, something like that. Yeah.
I've got that in here.
So maybe that's why they all took it. It's like, oh, he's doing this again.
Some people, that's what some people claim is what they thought, yeah. He also made plans to move the cult to Canada or the Caribbean on short notice should government agencies intervene against him. He eventually settled on Guyana because it was poor English-speaking, boasting a mostly black population and run by a socialist government. Jones claimed that he was constructing a socialist paradise free from the opposition of the United States government. The member tasked to oversee the construction of the so-called People's Temple Agricultural Project in a non-populated area of northwest Guyana was Timothy Stone, who was Grace Stone's husband, who was another of the temple's legal representatives. Jones ordered Stone to take his son John to Guyana because he feared that Grace, who had started divorce proceedings in 1976, might be awarded his custody. However, in June 1977, Stone met Grace in the U.S., and he left the cult himself due to its treatment of her as part of an effort to keep her from seeing her son. They formed the Concerned Relatives group and demanded John's return, but Jones and the cult refused.
Well, isn't the Concerned Relatives group, aren't they the anti-cult group that's around now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, they're just not just the Jonestown cult, but everybody else.
Right. That same summer, Jones and around 1,000 of his followers moved the Agricultural Project in Guyana, which was informally renamed Jonestown. The settlement, which had been self-sufficient until then, had trouble housing the sudden increase in population. As a result, the inhabitants had to work extra hours and cut rations to accommodate the newcomers. Undernourished, many fell ill of tropical diseases that the temple's doctors could neither identify nor treat properly. Among the sick was Jones himself, whose drug problem also seems to deepen at the time. He furiously attacked Stone as a traitor in his speeches and claimed that the U.S. had undergone a fascist takeover and was now a dictatorship that was examining racial minorities and political dissidents. White nights were expanded to include the whole population, and drills were called to prepare the people to deal with an imminent attack from the outside. A Red Brigade of members armed with guns and machetes patrolled the compound's perimeter, in theory to protect against such attacks, but actually to keep defectors from leaving. Meanwhile, the settlement speaker network kept repeating fake news of the fascist coup and repression in the U.S. to back Jones's claims. The concerned relatives traveled to Washington, D.C. in 1978 and denounced Jones for human rights.
The fascist coup of the Carter administration? Come on.
Right. The concerned relatives traveled to Washington, D.C. in 1978 and denounced Jones for human rights abuses in Guyana and the U.S. Jones then hired noted JFK assassination conspiracy theorists Mark Lane and Donald Freed to propagate the idea that everything was a grand conspiracy against the temple by intelligence services. In November, California Congressman Leo Ryan led a fact-finding mission to Guyana to investigate the allegations on the ground. 3 days after arriving in Guyana's capital, Georgetown, Ryan and a limited number of journalists and relatives of temple members boarded a small plane with a Guyanese officer and the U.S. Embassy officer Richard Dwyer, and flew to Port Kaituma, a few miles northeast of Jonestown. After long negotiations with the temple, the mission was given a tour of Jonestown and was allowed to talk to residents, but Jones barred journalists from staying in the camp for the night. The next day, an exalted temple member attacked Ryan with a knife. Dwyer, who had commanded the mission while on Guyanese soil, issued an order to leave Jonestown against Ryan's wishes, who swore he would return to continue the investigation. The group departed with 15 temple members who had expressed their wish to leave, and Jones didn't stop them, but he prophesied that Ryan would be shot. As the party boarded 2 planes that would return them to Georgetown, a defector that the others had warned about as a possible spy, Larry Layton, pulled a gun and fired into the crowd. He was incapacitated after injuring 2, but this was only a diversion from a larger attack by Red Brigade members that followed the group on a tractor-trailer. They injured 9 more and killed 5, NBC News correspondent Don Harris and cameraman Bob Brown, San Francisco Examiner photographer Greg Robinson, defector Patricia Parks, and Congressman Ryan, who was shot over 20 times, the last time in the face while he was already dead on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Back in Jonestown, Jones addressed the residents almost immediately, telling them the fascist government had killed the defectors and that this was the prelude of an attack of the compound itself, after which all survivors would be tortured, executed, or turned into dummies. He claimed to be in talks to get asylum in the Soviet Union, but that the Soviets had canceled such plans after the attack. As a result, the people of Jonestown had no choice but to commit revolutionary suicide by ingesting cyanide. Members who suggested alternatives were shut down by others and were forced to ingest poison or were shot by the Red Brigade. Jones then discussed with his staff the logistics of murdering Stone and whether John should be killed. John's body would later be found in Jones's personal cabin. And finally, Jones shot himself in the temple. His autopsy did reveal that there were enough drugs in his system to kill any man who had not built poison resistance through long-time drug use like he did.
Wow.
In total, 909 people committed suicide or were murdered at Jonestown. The order to commit suicide was also radioed to the temple headquarters in Georgetown, where members Linda Amos and her adult daughter Leanne murdered Amos's younger children with a kitchen knife, before Linda helped Leanne kill herself and then committed suicide with the very same weapon. It was ignored, however, by the rest of the members at Georgetown and the People's Temple basketball team, which was playing a match with the Guyanese national team in the capital and included Jones's sons Stephen, Jim Jr., and Timothy Jones. Only 20 people at Jonestown survived. Mike Prokes, the legal father of Chemo, Jones's son with mistress Carolyn Layton, left the compound to take the Joneses' will to Georgetown, in which they left everything they owned to the Communist Party of the Soviet Union and committed suicide during a press conference 4 months later. The remaining temple in California filed for bankruptcy and was officially dissolved in January 1979. Larry Layton was the only person convicted of the events related in Jonestown. In 1986, he was sentenced to life in prison for conspiracy to murder Ryan, but was released from custody in 2002. So Jim Jones was the archetypical cult leader and con artist. He found his victims among people who felt marginalized by society and presented himself as a way to find a better life. He had no problem to modify his discourse to connect with a new audience or staging situations using actors. Once enrolled, new members donated all their possessions to the temple, were cut off from relatives and friends outside the cult, and encouraged to not befriend other members and report any signs of dissidence to Jones.
I remember being really young and seeing the bodies on the news because they showed it.
Oh, yeah.
That was one of my first memories of a major news event.
Sure.
Yeah. Because they didn't look like people. They were all bloated because they were in the Guyanese sun for days before they got to him.
Yeah, it was terrible. Terrible. Dissidents were subjected to psychological, physical, and sexual abuse, and later in the cult's history, drugged. All members were continuously fed with fear of the future and the world outside the cult, so they would seek security in Jones and remain loyal to him. The events at Jonestown were planned years in advance, as evidenced by Jones obtaining a jeweler's license so he could legally buy cyanide, which was used to clean gold, and the stockpiling of enough ammunition to shoot each Jonestown resident 3 times, but only a few guns. The cyanide was mixed in large buckets with Flavor Aid in water.
Flavor Aid, that was it.
And offered
yeah, because Kool-Aid was kind of pissed. Everybody keeps using the phrase Kool-Aid. Hey, it wasn't even us.
Right. It eventually comes to be associated with Kool-Aid. It was Flavor Aid, and they offered it to the members, starting with the children. People that refused to drink were forced to ingest the poison by different means, with up to 35% of bodies at Jonestown not showing possible signs of having received injections, and an indeterminate number were shot. As you said, the events at Jonestown were immediately subject to extensive media coverage and became known as the Jonestown Massacre.
Yeah.
As awareness reached the public, outsiders refused to accept Jones's attempt to blame them for their deaths. Critics and apologists offered a variety of explanations for the events that transpired among Jones's followers. The Soviet Union publicly distanced itself from Jones and what they referred to as his bastardization of the concept of revolutionary suicide. American leaders denounced Jones as satanic and asserted that he and his teachings were in no ways connected to traditional Christianity. In an article entitled, quote, "On Satan in Jonestown," Billy Graham argued that it would be a mistake to identify Jones and his cult as Christian.
Billy Graham? Dirty man, anyway.
Graham was joined by other prominent Christian leaders in alleging that Jones was demonically possessed. Disciples of Christ responded to the Jonestown deaths with significant changes for ministerial ethics and a new process to remove ministers. The disciples issued a press release disavowing Jones and reported that the community in Jonestown was not affiliated with their denomination. They subsequently expelled People's Temple from their denomination. In the immediate aftermath, rumors arose that surviving members of People's Temple in San Francisco were organizing hit squads to target critics and enemies of the church. Law enforcement intervened to protect the media and other figures who were purported to be targeted. People's Temple's San Francisco headquarters was besieged by the media, angry protesters, and family members of the dead. James, who had returned from Jonestown to take leadership in San Francisco in early '78, was left to address the public. At first, he denied that Jones had any connection to the deaths and events, and that the events were a plot by enemies of the church, but he would later come to acknowledge the truth. The supporters of the People's Temple, especially politicians, had a difficult time explaining their connections to Jones following the deaths. After a period of reflection, some admitted they had been tricked by Jones. President Carter and the First Lady sought to minimize their connection to Jones. San Francisco Mayor George Moscone said he vomited when he heard of the massacre and called the friends and families of many of the victims to apologize and offer his sympathies. Investigations into the Jonestown Massacre were conducted by the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the U.S. Congress. Although individuals and groups had provided tips to the FBI about the People's Temple, no investigation was made before the massacre. The investigation primarily focused on why authorities, especially in the United States State Department, were unaware of the abuses in Jonestown. Although People's Temple collapsed shortly after the events of '78, some individuals continued to follow Jones's teaching through the 1980s. So we've got it through that far at least.
Yeah. I knew there was something like that. I was like, it's not. Yeah.
Since the events of the Jonestown Massacre, a massive amount of literature and study has been produced on the subject. Numerous documentaries, films, books, poetry, music, and art have been covered or inspired by the events of Jonestown. Jim Jones and the events at Jonestown had a defining influence on society's perception of cults. The widely known expression, drinking the Kool-Aid, developed after the events at Jonestown, although the specific beverage used at the massacre was Flavor Aid. So not what people thought. And that is the story of Jim Jones and the People's Temple.
Why, thank you, sir.
Hope you learned something new on that.
I've been kind of studying it. I remember that Powers Booth made-for-TV movie. That was like his first role, and oh my God, he was so good in that.
Yeah, there have been a ton of documentaries.
Oh boy, Powers Booth, by the way.
I've watched some of the documentaries on it, especially getting ready for this episode and whatnot. But yeah, I thought it was about time to do another cult, and why not do Jim Jones?
Let's do Jim Jones. I mean, you're going to do a cult. If you're going to be a bear, be a grizzly, right?
Do a big one. So that's why I'd been wanting to cover them for a while, so I finally sat down.
Yeah, I was thinking about covering. I was looking at it because I've got one coming up here pretty soon to record. So,
yep. Sorry, I stole one from you.
No. Actually, I decided against it after I'd studied it. I was like, oh, Geoffrey will probably do this. He likes to do cults. No, I'm going to do. I think I'm going to do the Holocaust of Bullets. That's what I feel like I need to do. So,
okay,
it's going to be rough. So,
all right,
getting you ready.
All right, I'm all ready for it. That'll come up in episode 75.
75, yes.
Can't believe that we're approaching that already.
I know, right? Look at us getting stuff done.
That's amazing. Well, that takes us to the end of another recording week. So, as always, please do check our website out where you can see pictures and links from this episode. If you want to get more information, you can also find our contact information there, where if you want to tell us things you want to hear, things you don't want to hear, we do have things already in queue that people have asked for that we will be doing. So please do let us know.
Yes, please. We would like to do requests, so it's fun.
You can also find the link to our merchandise on our website, where if you wish to show off your Nerdery and Murdery fandom, please do check out what we have to offer there.
Goff, I've got your shirt.
Way in the past now. You can also find the link to our Patreon, where if you wish to donate to the show, help us keep going, because there are costs that are associated with it. I promise you, we do not have limo service that brings Ziggy and Will here every couple of weeks. So
we do not. Please and thank you.
So I promise you it doesn't go to that. So yes, please and thank you. And last, please don't forget to leave a review wherever you can. Leave a 5-star review. It really helps us. It helps other people find our content, and helps get our name out there. So with that,
I've been Zig with your Nerdery.
And I'm Geoffrey with your Murdery.
Cue the music.